are yours. For those of you that know me, you know that I traveled with the Dallas student for 2 years. You know that Tabitha is one of my dearest friends. You know that I have the honor to be able to work with the best hairdressers in the world, and I do travel all over with those hairdressers. But the story that I want to share with you today is where that all came from, and the fact that the journey along the way was a rocky one. When I tell you it was a rocky one, it was a rocky one. And I feel so honored. I can't even tell you how honored I am to be sitting in front of 1,600 of you, because you made us what we are today. And so I'm going to give you some thoughts. The first one is, how do we inspire ourselves to greatness when nothing less will do? If you remember the movie Invictus, Nelson Mandela was first going out of jail, right, and he became the president of South Africa. And he said, how do we inspire ourselves to greatness when nothing less will do? What's interesting today is I think about what I've seen with Matrix, is that that's exactly what the Matrix team has had to do. They've had to inspire their greatness because this company, obviously, for the last several years, didn't inspire the same level of greatness that you're seeing. They had to. When I shared with you some of the stories about what happened in my life, I had to. I was out of money. Nobody believed in me behind the chair. And I had to. If I was moving forward, I had to. So, the journey of my life, what I realized, is that the journey was really about having a life with passion. And I think that a life without passion is not really a life worth living. The first 33 years of my life, I lived life without passion. I dropped out of school when I was 19 years old. I was a geophysics major. Interesting, you can see the relevance of that in the salon industry. And yeah, I know everybody says geophysics major, that's kind of interesting. But you know what, the path that we take, it's the path that gets us to where we're going to go. So I dropped out of school when I was 19 years old. I became a recruiter, a headhunter, if many of you know what that is. And I worked as a headhunter in this industry for 10 years, placing over 700 people in this industry. I made a lot of money. I had $1 million in the bank when I was 26 years old. And I hated every single day of my life. I hated it. I had no passion in my life. And so I would wake up, and my friends would tell me, go buy the fancy cars, go buy the fancy house, go on fancy vacations. And I did all of the above. And I hated my life. I hated every single day of it. When I started HumanManager.com, I lost $2.5 million in 1 year. I put my family in entire jeopardy. And when I say entire jeopardy, I put us in jeopardy. Because we didn't have a lot of millions of dollars sitting around. And I do have an investor that invested $2 million for part of my company, 20%, and I lost all of his money too. Everybody wanted me to quit. Nobody believed in my dream. And across all odds, I did. And you know what? You have to believe in yourself, because sometimes that's all you got, and that's all you need to have. Because the dreams that we have are ours. For those of you who own salons, that dream was yours. You took the risk. You believed. Many of you got out of high school when people thought, yeah, I'm going to become a hairdresser, huh? Yeah, that's her last choice, not her first choice. They didn't know how much you loved and had passion for what it is that you did. I had this in, if you know our magazine, we never sell the inside spread and we don't sell the back cover. And it's our commitment to you that we will always inspire you in the places that advertisers pay the most for. We'll never give those positions up. They're always for you. And I shot all of this graffiti actually in Amsterdam that says our only responsibility in this life is to live the life that we were meant to live. To find our destiny and live our dreams. And when we're on the right path in life, the wrong doors will close, the right doors will open, the moon and stars will align, and our passion will guide us. Listen to your soul, do what you love, your destiny is waiting. So, yeah. What's interesting is I was in Amsterdam and I was kind of in a bad time, and so the little note below that said that I was lost on the streets of Amsterdam, and I was lost on the streets of Amsterdam. So here's my story. After sharing with you that yes, I do have an opportunity to spend time and fly all around the world, I want to share a story of where I came from. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who grew up on a small farm on a road that led to nowhere. That's the house I lived in for the first 10 years of my life. My parents paid $3,000 for our house. They were 19 and 20 when my sister and I were born. I'm an identical twin, and we were extremely poor. When I tell you how poor we were, my clothes were from the Salvation Army, and my mom actually had to ration our food until my dad got his paycheck on Friday afternoon. We didn't have any soda in the house, we didn't have any cookies, we didn't have anything like that. We were poor, I mean really poor. And we lived in the middle of nowhere. So I lived in Macomb, Illinois, and grew up in a town of about 8,000 people. And the interesting thing about the town is when I moved to the big city and lived in the suburbs, I thought that every single town had cornfields in between before you got to the next town. I really did. I couldn't believe it. One time, like, how do I know when the town ends and the next town begins? Because we were literally, and I know there are some people here from small towns, and you got me, you know what I'm talking about. So anyway, I want to tell you a story about this house. We were surrounded by cornfields, so in the summertime, the corn would grow, and you couldn't see our house, and we lived on this really long dirt road. It was over a quarter of a mile long. And so I said to my parents, I want a 10-speed bike. I was 9 years old. And they said, well, we don't have the money for a 10-speed bike. And I said, I know. So I said, but what I've decided that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a lemonade stand. My parents said, Mary, we only have about 6 cars that go by our house every day, on a good day. And I said, well, you know what, I'm going to do it anyway because I don't know that I really have any other options, and all the kids in school are getting their 10-speed bikes, so I want mine. So I made the decision that I would take my little table, my card table, and I would walk it down that quarter-mile driveway, and I would pop it sitting right there on the edge of the driveway. I had my little sign that said 25 cents for my lemonade, and I sat down, and I waited for the cars to go by. And interestingly, many of the cars did actually stop, because how many kids have a lemonade stand in the middle of nowhere? So sometimes I had lemonade, sometimes I had tea, and I probably wouldn't surprise you to tell you that sometimes I actually just had water. And the funny thing is that every day I'd bring it down, and when my customers came, many of them actually stopped every single day because they understood my plight, you know, that I wanted that 10-speed bike. So what ended up happening is we were too poor to have plastic cups, so we'd actually have to stand there with the glass cup because I needed my glass cup. So, at the end of the summer, I got my 10-speed bike. Yeah. That's the moral of that story. The moral of that story is I spent an entire summer at the end of the driveway doing something that people thought could not be done. The moral of BehindTheChair.com is when I first got started, 11 years ago, about 10% of you had email addresses. And the good old boys said, hairdressers will never turn on a computer. They're not smart enough to. Hairdressers will never have an email address. Hairdressers will never be educated online. And hairdressers will never join a community called BehindTheChair.com. Were they right or wrong? So I did something true. Somebody I think in the back said true. No. Anyway, so really the idea was that I did something crazy, again, like my lemonade stand. So you only get what you expect in life. Set high goals. You only get what you expect. If you expect very little, you get very little. If you expect a lot and you reach for the stars,